Sunday. How y'all doing today? I'm looking all crazy, but it's Sunday. I'm not working today. Not really. I am, but I'm not. I just do writing today is what I do. I study and I do writing today on Sunday. My name is Stacey Renee. I'm a mindset coach. I like to say a life on life's terms coach because we go through different changes, challenges, and chapters in our lives. And so this morning, kind of what we're talking about is how these default settings, you may say to yourself, I don't even know what a default setting is. When people used to talk to me about default settings, I used to be like, I didn't know the difference. So I hope that this morning, whatever we talk about in story time with Stacey, that it helps you to be clear on what your default settings are. So I'm a little bit late this morning. I like to come on here at 9 o'clock East Central Standard. I guess it was 9 o'clock Eastern Standard, but it stays 9 o'clock for me because our time doesn't change here. So while the time changes in other places, it doesn't change here. So while we're waiting here, again, trying to feed the algorithms, I'm trying to feed positive algorithms. So I'm looking for subscribers, people who are going to align with creating an algorithm of healing rather than continuing to look and doom scroll for things. As I know that I would get more views if I would talk crazy about things, but I'm hoping that the crazy times will change and understanding. Good morning, Greg. How are you? That we have to be a part of those crazy times changing. What are you up to today? It's evening time where you are, right? Is it starting to get cooler for you yet now? Well, I hope so. Today it's story time with Stacey. So, I try to do these stories so that as we begin our week, sometimes we can relate more with stories, and they're a little more entertaining. Because sometimes, Sundays, I got my Superwoman Stacey Sunday shirt on. It was actually my son's shirt that he had. So, I saved these things. And so it's the Ides of March today. So, how are you today? How are you feeling and doing? And what are you up to? Yes, early autumn. I know you're glad to see the cooler temps come in. So today we're going to talk about, have people mentioned to you default settings before, and do you know what default settings are? I think most of us, when we talk about the default settings, that I know when people used to talk to me about default settings, I really didn't understand what that meant, and so last week's topic was, are you worried about it, wallowing in it, or working on it? And when we're working on things, things change. As a builder, because you're very good with building with your hands and cooking. And so you're kind of artsy, art, you might not embrace that, but you're artistic, And so I'm artistic too. So sometimes though, even though we're creating the physical, we don't realize what we're creating internally, right? So I've got my notes here today, and I'm glad things are cooling off for you. They're heating up for me. I got to spend yesterday on the beach, and Greg, you brought another motorcycle today, and more comfortable than the old one. Yes, because we're supposed to evolve, right? We're supposed to continue to grow, and things do change, and we can't help things changing. And so the default setting, keeps us with doing the same thing, expecting different results sometimes, that insanity. But I'm glad, congratulations on your new motorcycle. That's exciting. So I see that there's a few more here today. If you'll say hello, tell me where you're from, and are you familiar with the default setting? Because we're going to talk about that. We talked about, are you worried about it, wallowing in it, or working on it last week? A lot of times when people will say, I'm working on it, they're working for other people's approval rather than working on something for themselves. That satisfaction of creating. I believe you, Greg, work on the satisfaction of creating, is that we get to look back at our work. Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. But then when we get to look back, that's the reward in doing that. And some of us have to work on our reward system, because I know you've made a big life transformation too here recently with no smoke, with your diet, your exercise, with the things that you're doing. And that's part of a transformation, And so when we realize that things do change, a lot of times we don't take care of our bodies until we start getting these diagnoses. And so in my Unbound Self workshop that we've been working on, we're halfway through now, is that we get to talk about how and explore how our minds and our thoughts and our feelings affect our bodies. And so that default setting can be a learned behavior that maybe isn't healthy for us. But if we would have all known better, we would have done better. My dad used to say my dad died at 58 years old. And he used to say if I'd have known that I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. Yes, my wife has written a big list of furniture I have to make. You stay busy. You stay busy creating. And I'm a creator too. So I write these stories and I write these things and I hope that it helps someone. And I want to thank you all who have subscribed to this channel and who come on and participate in this channel, because we're creating an algorithm to where we get to see ourselves. I hope that what I do helps us to see ourselves and to appreciate ourselves more clearly when so many people are looking for appreciation and validation outside of themselves these days. And sometimes that was set in these default settings. And so if we're not clear on what the default settings are, then how can we change them if we don't even know what they are? And I know that people used to talk to me about your default setting, and most of the time they were talking about how stubborn I am. And I've learned when to be stubborn and when to listen, and so it takes confidence to know that we can't listen. Not everybody has our best intentions. So we talk about sometimes the wisdom to know the difference. Good morning, Mateo. Pure Spanish here. I wish my Spanish was better. I am working on it. I'm at 168 days on Duolingo. I missed last night. I got sucked into a series, and my friend's like, oh, you need to watch this series, and she got it hooked up for me, and so I had to watch 4 episodes. This is what I mean about what do we allow and put into our mind. So I got my notes here. Good luck, Mateo. Maybe it will change it if you get to watch the replay, that it will subtitle it. I know your name is Gregory. Thank you for being here, Gregory. I always appreciate getting to see you, and thank you for subscribing, and all who subscribe, because what you're doing is you're creating a different algorithm. As you know, I could probably be more popular and have a better algorithm if I would be talking about the war, if I would be talking about these things, but I appreciate you showing up, because I don't talk about those things. I don't talk about divided things. I want us to all feel a part of something. And whether it's 1 here or 15, then, I want you to feel a part of something, and to be able to, you can't control all the things going out there in the world, but you can control yourself and your own algorithm. Trying to remember my Italian. It is so funny you mention that, because I'm about to, this is why I have the notes here too, so I can, communicate with y'all. I got to go to the beach yesterday with one of my dear, dear friends, and we went to the beach, and then, my goal is to move to Europe next year, and so Spain, but I'll get to go to Italy. And so that's so cool that you mentioned that, because I watched this movie last night. It was called Solo Mios. And I got to see the culture and everything. And that's what we have to do to manifest these things, is not naysay and go on a default of fear, if that's what we have a default of. Not everybody does. Or have a default of, I already know, how things are going to turn out. Life is an adventure, and this is the kind of algorithm that I'm trying to set, is when we're in an adventure, it's creative, because we don't know what's going to happen. I'm sitting here, I told my friend yesterday, I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen this year, because I don't know what's going to happen year after year. I just know that I'm going to do what I can do. So trying to remember you're Italian, that is really cool, because I loved getting to go. After we left the beach yesterday, because the beach was a manifestation I had prayed about and wanted and contemplated 10 years ago, and now I'm here. So how I'm going to get to Italy is the same way that I got here. And so when we're able to realize what we can do and just take these small steps on a daily or weekly basis, we can get there, rather than depending on the world outside to tell us where we're going and whether we can get there or not. And us deciding because we saw something on the internet that the world is doomed and we're not going there. That's not true. The world has been doomed so many times before, and we're still here. And as long as we're still breathing, we are still meant to create our destiny, our future. And that's what I like to talk about here today, is that we don't need to just doom scroll and to buy into all of that. So it helps us to train our own algorithm and to be in charge of our own health, right, Greg? So to be in charge of our own health rather than depending on something outside of us to fix us. And you're doing it. You're taking those steps. You're eating, right. You're being active. So let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how our lives and thinking this is just the way things are? Has anybody ever thought this is just the way things are? And when we think this is just the way things are, we tend to accept that, but we don't really, our soul doesn't accept that because we long. So, how do we turn our longing from longing to desire? A lot of people are afraid to desire. They're afraid to desire anything because they're afraid they're not going to get it. That's our human nature, is to be afraid we're not going to get something that we want, or we're going to lose something that we have. So, this is where the thoughts come in. I hate when things pop up on my screen, not from y'all, but from other platforms while I'm trying to talk because I'm afraid it won't go away. So these are my fears. But anyway, that creativity, like I said, where I am now was where I wanted to be 10 years from now. And see, when we use that as our evidence for our growth, that's how we're going to get to where we want to be 10 years from now. But when you doom scroll and you let the world tell you these things, this is what I'm trying to create, this algorithm, is I want you to realize how powerful your mind is and how your mind will control your body, your experiences. And so sometimes we have to expand our mind. And I know that Friday on here, I think it was Friday on here, that I suggested that we get the self-esteem alphabet. So, if you say, if somebody asks you, how do you feel? Or you're thinking, how do I feel? I feel awful. Well, what do you want to feel? You want to feel amazing. So the self-esteem alphabet is learning to expand our alphabet from these words, because most of us were just programmed to say, I'm fine, I'm good. And so we feel, we're not feeling and living our lives to the fullest. I'm not saying to put all your problems out there for everybody. I'm just saying that sometimes we don't realize our programming and the limitations that we place on our lives by just the words that we say. And when we're saying things that people want to hear all the time. And it's not just saying things people want to hear, because I'm not saying to say, when someone asks you how you're doing, to say, oh, I'm awful, because not everybody's safe to tell you're awful, or not everybody wants to hear that. A lot of people say I'm okay. And I know when I'm sitting with somebody and I say, how are you doing today? And they say, oh, I'm okay, that we need to unpack some stuff, So I learned to also say, when I was working with, people, because my hormones could be affected at times, and sometimes I had a male boss and he would say, Stacey, you seem quiet today. And sometimes people can think that's about them. And I would be like, that's not you, it's just hormones. So I learned to say, to warn people about these things. And so when I did get upset about something, that they knew that, that it was real, not to just blame my hormones when I do get upset about something. So I could own when I get upset about my hormones and when I'm not upset about my hormones. And so then there was other times when he said, Stacey, you seem distant, or what's the matter with you? I could say, you know what? I just don't feel very valued here. You know, my hypertension is going down 130. Oh, look at that. See, you're changing your life, and it's doing better, right? Is that our thoughts can improve our life, and you're proof of that. So I work with a lot of people who work on their weight, or they work on addictions. Maybe it's addiction to shopping. A lot of people with addiction to shopping, it's hard. And food too. So it's about being able to, what do we want, and make decisions according to that. And you want to live because you've got a great family. So making those decisions, most people that I work with weight were inspired by their family, because they want to be with their family and they don't want to die. They have this life force within them, even if they don't have a family, because some people I've seen, there's one, influencer, she's lost over 400 pounds. And she lost a lot of family, and part of the grief was part of what fed her food addiction. And so she's very inspiring. We can turn our stories to inspirations. And so I hope that is something that you all will look for on here, that something, will inspire you. And I know that, people want to hear more about the negative things than the positive things a lot of times, but there's some that want to listen, to the positive. And so thank you for being here, and for me being able to provide the service that I'm able to provide, for me to be able to serve my purpose. Because I haven't always had it easy. So I hope that when someone's struggling, that if I can help one person, because I see one person's here, and it's probably you, Greg, and I do have much appreciation for you, and you are inspiring too. So just to remind you of that, because we don't always get reminded of that. That you don't have to do grandiose things to be inspiring. You don't have to, so that's what this channel and this algorithm is about. So when we think that this is just the way that our lives are, we're just on, this is the way that we think, this is the way that we react, and this is the way that we see ourselves. And so we just become in acceptance or settling for that. And when we settle for that, we settle outside of our lives too. And so I had to learn that, and it feels like it's reality. It feels like this is my lot in life. This is the way things are supposed to be. And I get it, because I was like that too, but I had to learn that my mind was powerful. I had to learn that I was smart, because I didn't think I was smart, and so I had to learn, yes, I am smart, because we are what we say we are. So that's very important. And this is why I was talking about the self-esteem alphabet, is because I am amazing. I am brilliant. I am charismatic. I am divine. We can go from disaster to divine. So it's about it. Our experiences will expand when we expand our vocabulary, because for me to start thinking, what does divine look like? I had to entertain that a little bit, I thought I was very fit. Glad I had my 51 years full checkup. I will be able to drive tractor trailers again, maybe in a month. Yes, yes. So, Oswaldo, no, I can't speak to you in Spanish because I mostly speak English. That's my first language. I am learning Spanish, but I try to speak English here because I don't want to mess anything up, because when you're talking to people about mindset, I don't want to mess up anybody's mindset. We already can get our mindsets messed up enough, and that's the algorithms that I'm trying to create, is so that you can be clear in your mind and not depend on all that outside stimulation or frustration to navigate your system, so that you can feel comfortable in your own skin from within. So it's about confidence, and I feel confident in my speaking English. I have a little less confidence in my Spanish. I'm working on it, though. I really am. So, yes, congratulations to all of you here who are taking these small steps day by day to change things. Often we're actually living from something, though, that default setting is defined as something that we're living from a long time ago. Those patterns, like from 1 to 12 years old, that we're created, embedded, ingrained in our systems. And it gets so frustrating because we feel like this keeps happening in my life. But it's just because that's what we feel comfortable with. So when we settle and accept, this is what we've accepted from the 1 to 12 years, and we think that this is our truth. We think that this is who we are. But we can change how we think. And that's part of our being adulthood, So patterns show up by our families, our experiences, and sometimes insecurity and uncertainty growing up. If you had insecurity and uncertainty growing up, then this feels exceptionally challenging now. And we always search for answers when we feel insecure growing up. We will search for answers in somebody's body language, posture. If they say hi to us or don't say hi to us, we'll think it's about us, because we learned from our whoever to perform. We learned that if we don't act or behave a certain way, then someone's not going to approve of us or take our love away. And we all want love, because that's your birthright here, is to have love. Love is the bottom line. If you are in the Bible, then that's the greatest gift of all, is love. So love. So how do we love? Sometimes we don't even love ourselves. I was talking to my friend last night, and we were talking about love at first sight. And, I know with my first marriage, I didn't even love myself. So I did not love him at first sight. And so I don't know about love at first sight. I think Greg might have had love at first sight, but some people do and some people don't. And that's why we are all so different here. And that's what I try to speak to, is even though we can be different and have different experiences, is we don't have to be divided by those, is that we can unite ourselves with our self, selves, and soul. And then we're going to feel comfortable in our own skin when we show up in this world. So when we can erase those patterns, so when we can unlearn those patterns, and that's what I try to do here, is to help us change our patterns, to change these things, because we have to change it. I know in our insecurities, in uncertainties, we may look for the answers outside of ourselves, but the answers are truly inside of ourselves. I have very faith-filled persons that I work with, but still yet insecure, just like me. I was that way too. And I had to learn to change my mindset to have that belief, faith, and trust in the magic, mystery, and miracles in each and every one of us. Whether I like or dislike things in my life, they're meant for me to be able to observe and look at with my own mind rather than have to get justified with somebody else. I don't have to talk about this experience with somebody else to get justified. I have to pray about it for myself. Now, if you're not a praying person, just know that your words are expressions of your thoughts, and your body language and your actions are expressions of your feelings. So to be able to understand, am I feeling shut down and freeze? Am I feeling like I'm in flight, trying to distract and escape? Or am I in fight? Am I like trying to defend myself? So are you in flight, fight, or freeze? Freeze, flight, or fight? So but most of us don't even ask ourselves these questions when we get upset. Is why am I upset? We think it's somebody else is why we're upset. So that's that default setting, because it's that just call for healing when we get upset, So when our car gets hot, just like when we get hot, the radiator usually is an indication. And what do we need? Water. So sometimes we just need to cry so that we can regulate ourselves once again and start over. Just start over, because that's all we have to do. Is we get a series, as long as you're breathing, you get a series of starting over, because the breath rises and falls, your heartbeat rises and falls, things rise and they fall, and that's life on life's terms. It's not about how good you are, how you perform, although it's not to say don't perform and don't be good to what feels good to you. And this is why we're talking about creative freedom today, y'all. Creative freedom is to own your creative freedom, and some of us don't even realize what it is within us. And I know I didn't either. When I used to organize and decorate for a long time, I did it for free because I thought everybody could do it. You see, I didn't value myself. I didn't love myself in the day. And to understand and realize how to value and love myself is that I did have a gift. Greg's got a gift there of being able to create. Of what can you create? And that is your gift. Not everybody can do what I do. Not everybody can do what you do. I looked at a resume the other day of one of my clients, and it's like, I can't do what you do. And she said to me, I can't do what you do. So this is the gift of our lives. And that's why we're supposed to be unified, is we all have these gifts. We're not supposed to compare our gifts to another, really. It's to embrace our gifts with one another. So owning our creative freedom and knowing our value and nurturing it. So what's that look like? So it's a bridge from last week. Are we worrying about it, wallowing in it, or working on it? Because we're doing one of those things. So because when we get stuck in wallowing or worrying, we are often operating from our default settings that maybe we were taught how to worry and wallow, it could have been the language from 1 to 12 years old that we heard and that we saw, the expressions we saw. So these are patterns that we learned long ago called our default settings. So the growing beyond our default settings requires something many people don't do at first. We weren't taught to do it, so we don't. So it requires looking honestly at our past patterns. I know for me, I had to look at that. And so sometimes when we do that, we may even recognize something that recovery communities call insanity. It's doing the same thing, expecting different results. And so we'll take that on as our realities, is that it just doesn't work for me. But it's because we haven't tried something else, that we haven't tried loving ourselves maybe. Maybe we don't know what that looks like. And so we have to nurture ourselves to find that. And it means taking time and not that instant gratification. It's about the crying, the tears, when the radiator's overheat and, when our mind is overheating and we're so overwhelmed. That's when I cry, typically, is when I just get overwhelmed or there's so much pressure built up that I need to cry. And sometimes we just need to cry. We don't have to blame it on anybody else. It's just like, I feel overwhelmed. And it means we're having an FGO, a effing growth opportunity. That's all. That's all it is. There's nothing, you're not anything that you may negatively call yourself. It's just a growth opportunity is all that it is. And so no one wants to look at insanity, do we? It's like, no, I'm not insane. When I first got into the 12-step programs, I didn't think, how am I insane? I'm not insane because I didn't really have any severe consequences. I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change, we'll do something about it. We'll do something and get out of that default setting, right? So now, most of us don't want to look at those things, though, that insanity. Why would we do that? And only when the pain gets great would we be willing to look at what have I done that's the same thing? What is the pattern? Because we need to break those patterns, disconnect those. So something interesting happens in life when we do look at that. That it gives us our power, puts us back in our power because we felt powerless when we did these things. So like this, I said, the pain of staying the same overruns the pain of growing. So when that moment comes, we become willing to change. We change our minds. And when we begin changing our minds, we change our lives. We have to change our mind to change our lives. Because the outside, that's why it's insane. Because when we're dependent on the outside to change, that we can manipulate the outside. I know I tried to manipulate the outside. I didn't realize that was what I was doing. So again, that's where I had to look at my insane behavior and that learned behavior. At a sheep station, I saw the farmer build a bath out of slabs of cement, and the boiler was made out of a 44-gallon drum with a fire under it. Wow, you can learn a lot from a lot of people. And what did you think you learned? What was one of the virtues? Did you learn patience from that? Because it takes patience to think these things out. And this is where most of us get stuck in that loop, right, Greg? Is we can get stuck in a loop if we don't have the patience to think things out about the possibilities. And this is where creativity comes from, is being able to think about the possibilities and change our minds from thinking I can't and it's impossible to being like I can and the possibilities, but having the patience to think. But when our central nervous systems are overrun into that fight, flight, and freeze, we either, like I said, will shut down and freeze, or in flight, we'll distract ourselves, and then in fight, it's obvious we're going to defend ourselves. So being able to notice when we're doing any of these, when we feel overwhelmed because we're afraid to cry. I had someone tell me the other day they didn't like crying in front of people. I'm like, you're crying in front of people helps somebody else, because vulnerability, having permission to be vulnerable, to be like, even when we're successful, that sometimes we cry, sometimes we feel overwhelmed. Those are growth opportunities. And when we can recognize that as a growth opportunity, if the tears water in our soul, we can let go of that control and realize the only thing I can control is right here. And so how do I want to navigate and make things clear? Because sometimes, it doesn't appear that sometimes I've got one person here, but that one person is important. Now, some people would say, I had somebody say to me the other night, you only have one person here. Well, I didn't realize my settings were set to private, and I don't know how, but anyway, and I'm like, but that one person, if this one person gets this algorithm of learning how to help themselves heal, like I did, because it took somebody to help me. And if I can help somebody, that one person can go on to help somebody else. Because another client I had the other day told me, I hope that, I can help you back, or, and I'm like, no, most of us that want to help somebody don't want you to help us back. We want you to help somebody else. For me, that's what I want, is if I help somebody, go help somebody else, because that's unity and not division. And that's what I try to create here, is unity and not division. It doesn't mean you can help everybody, because some people, they may want help, but they don't want to put forth any work. They don't want to change. Some people want help, but don't want to change. And I've been those people too that wanted help and didn't want to change because I couldn't see. And this is what I try to provide for people here, is that being able to see how we are developing and how we can change. So performing for love, right? I know I used to perform for love, and I never felt appreciated when I performed for love. Anybody here ever not feel appreciated when you're performing for love? Maybe you don't even recognize you're performing for love, but you may be doing everything and they just don't appreciate it, right? So many of us grew up performing in our families. This was a learned behavior. And so performing to be the good one, performing to be helpful, performing to be strong, performing to be the one who holds everything together. And appreciation is a beautiful thing. And because we want appreciation for this. But what happens when we don't feel appreciated for it? I know for me, I rebelled. I rebelled because, like I said, a lot of the learned things are from 1 to 12. And then after 12, when's the typical time people start to rebel? For me, it was preteen and teen. That's when I started to rebel because it didn't seem like I ever did anything good enough. Didn't do anything good enough. I couldn't get recognized. I would try to be good and get recognized and get approval. And I didn't feel like I did. And I probably did, but I was more focused on those that didn't approve of me than focused on those that did. So, but when our nervous system grows up in uncertainty, it can create a deep insecurity inside of us. So when we're uncertain, we'll be insecure. That's just all. And so most of us don't realize that we grew up in uncertainty or that it created insecurity, and we don't recognize when we're insecure. Most of us go into that flight, if nothing else. If we don't shut down, we'll go into flight. And so that means that we're distracting ourselves because we just don't know what to do. That's all. So I had to learn what to do, and that's what I try to help people do on here. When that happens, we may spend time searching outside of ourselves for validation. I know that I did. Even though I was very independent, I had to get honest with myself. I was independent. I prided myself on being independent, but I really wasn't. That was the tricks and the rationalizations and justifications that I would play with my own mindset. And I had to interrupt those cycles and break the patterns myself so that I could achieve more and do more and be more. Do what I wanted rather than make up all the stories of why I couldn't. I had to make up all the stories of why I could. Instead of focusing on that one that didn't approve, I had to focus on those that encouraged. So what I eventually learned through therapy and my work in the 12 steps was something that was life-changing, that through the inventories and through the reflection, I began to see what I needed to protect and what I needed to release, what I needed to defend and what I need to release, because I didn't need to protect myself all the time. And what I'd been trying to control was never mine to control when I'm trying to control outside things, trying to help other people's lives instead of building my own life. When I'm trying to, it was just distractions when I was doing that. It was distracting. So I had to start putting that work into myself and starting to look at my own problems rather than look at somebody else's, because I was limited in my words and what I knew. And what I wanted to create. So I had to expand in my words of what I want to create, like with that self-esteem alphabet that I was talking about. So I had unknowingly accepted some of these feelings as my identity, those insecurities. I had accepted that as my identity, but they were only patterns, just patterns. So the opposite of insecurity is gaining confidence, right? So I had to learn how to create confidence within myself. I didn't wake up with confidence one day. I had to work on it. That was practice and development and gaining confidence. So the patterns had to change. So creation through clarity. Something else I began to notice is many of us pray for things. We pray for love. We pray for opportunity. We pray for peace. But sometimes we change our prayers the moment something new shows up. We get distracted and it's like, and we decide that it's not working. We look, hey, Ever Experience, how are you doing? From India, right? So I know. Thank you for being here this morning, or it's morning where I am. It's probably evening where you are. So, but sometimes we change our prayers the moment something new shows up. Our clarity shifts, our direction shifts, and suddenly we're navigating life based on reactions rather than intention. When I wake up in the morning, I set my intention. Greg, one of my best sheep shearers was a naughty boy, young from the city. His parents dumped at a sheep station, and there was nowhere for him to go. He had a great sheep shearing career. Ah, that's sweet that you taught him how to shear sheep. He wouldn't know how if you didn't teach him how. And this is what I'm talking about with these learned behaviors. You're doing good. Thanks for asking. How you doing? I'm doing great. I got to go to the beach yesterday, and I didn't work yesterday, and today I get to work on my creativity, and that's what we're talking about this morning is creativity, about owning our own creative freedom, not depending on somebody else to tell me what to create, but to have my own creative freedom. One of my clients this week also talked about how she does baked goods. and it's a talent and a gift, just like my organizing and decorating was. But she didn't think anything about it. She didn't know to value it. Just like I didn't used to know how to value my organizing and decorating, but my organizing, all these things lead up to a path if we're mindful about it, rather than just thinking this always happens or this. When we are able to own our creative freedom, we're able to think, what am I going to create? I created this now. What can I create next? You didn't teach him. He taught you how to shear sheep faster. See, there's the teacher and the student and the teacher, and we're always learning from each other. And this is what I'm talking about, unity and community, is that we're not supposed to be repelled from each other and afraid of each other. I'm not saying everybody has your best interest at heart either. So I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to tell you to compromise yourself with people who aren't good for your health. I'm just trying to tell you how to be clear, or trying to show you how to be clear through these meetings and these stories and these things that I share, because I had to learn how to be clear, because I didn't trust myself, because I went on my default setting, which was what we talked about today. And when people would talk to me about my default setting, I didn't know. Hi, Aussie Jace. So when I didn't know about my default setting, I would just do things in my patterns. These were my patterns. These were my systems that I had created without knowing I created them. I thought it was my reality. So I had to understand and embrace my own creativity to know if I was going in that flight, fight, and freeze. The fight, obviously, defending ourselves. The flight is distracting ourselves. And the freeze is just numbing ourselves, right? So rather than going into those, I had to get creative, because those were just coping skills for what I didn't understand, that uncertainty, that insecurity. So if I wanted to be confident, I had to change my mind. I had to change my mind and quit owning the I can'ts, and quit owning the fears, and quit owning the uncertainties, and quit owning the insecurities. Even though I wouldn't say I was insecure, I would try to be doing the opposite of what insecurity was, but it was more insecure. I had to look at my patterns. I don't know if any of you all have had this, but I had to look at my patterns. So through alignment, when we create with grace, we allow room for something special. And I know for me, grace doesn't come with just these angel wings just showing up. Grace comes through the tears. That's where the grace comes from, is when I finally see another way clear. That is grace for me. Is to be able to see that, because sometimes my wife is insecure. Yeah. Sometimes we were brought up in an insecure environment, and we can't just think our way out of it. We have to heal that insecurity within us. If she grew up in a life with uncertainty, she's probably going to have insecurity. I know I grew up in uncertain things. Sometimes you don't know what's going to happen when you go home. Sometimes you don't know what's going to happen, and this insecurity of not knowing what's going to happen has us trying to control things so that it doesn't happen. But usually the more we try to control something, the more we repulse the something, and we push it back. Yeah, Greg's an Aussie too, right? So y'all are like Aussies. So that's cool. I love your accents, by the way. I love the Australian accents. So when we create with grace, we allow something beautiful. It's about, growing through the tears. We know that what we grow outside has to have water. Even if it's the wood like Greg works with, that wood had to grow from the water. That's earth. So we the earth, air, water, and fire. It's growing. It's all together. So there's a mystery in life, and we set an intention. When we understand the magic, mystery, and miracles of life. For me, I do this every morning as I'm praying, and I have these 3 candles, and I have the magic candle, which is the creativity, and that creativity with grace, because it's not going to happen just because I decided I'm going to create something. It takes nurturing, it takes encouragement, it takes time, and it takes patience, and it takes the intention of just continuing to keep doing it, even when it doesn't look like it's working, because it is working. And that's where you have faith. And faith is in the transformation of just continuing. You have to have the action put forth too after the creativity. And faith requires us to take that actions, to take these small steps daily or weekly, whatever's comfortable for you, to just stay focused on what it is you feel convicted. If you're praying about it, you're convicted about it. And then that's to having that faith is in this mystery, because when anytime people are talking about faith, you're talking about mystery. And we can't predict how these things are going to turn out. Like I said, I don't know what's going to happen this year. And also, I know where I want to be next year. So is it getting from here to there? I don't know yet. I just know that I'm showing up on these labs, whether it's one person or 4 people or 15 people, however many, I'm just showing up with the intention of helping this world to create today, but to heal whatever our perceptions are that keep us feel like we're stuck, because I felt that way too. And I know the value of being able to help somebody. No, I'm not moving to Florida. I want to move to Spain someday. I want to go to Europe. I was just talking to Greg. He's brushing up on his Italian. I'm working on my Spanish, but Latin is so close, because I was watching a movie last night where it was Solo Mios. It was a very cute story, but it was in Italy. And I was like, yes, I want to be in that. I want to be there. It's been a bucket list thing. So I'm not dying yet, y'all. But why wait till you're dying and wish you would have done the things that you wanted to do, right? That's what I'm here to help you too. Is we can focus on what are we focusing on. I talked about our algorithms, because what we're focusing on, I appreciate all you have subscribed here, because you're building an algorithm to empower yourself, because I'm trying to show you how I empowered myself, and to let you know that there is help. Because sometimes when we're looking for hope, that's what I'm trying to spread here, is hope. Because a lot of people are hoping, but they're afraid to put forth that action. We do get stuck. We do get insane, and we don't know we're insane in that flat, and we feel like, oh, I'm stupid, or I did. I'm stupid, but I wasn't stupid. I was just practicing insanity instead of practicing developing what I wanted. And to do that, it requires believing in our worth. And sometimes those patterns diminished our worth, is all that I'm saying. As we may have learned patterns that weren't exactly encouraging our self-worth. And we have to be the ones to change it, because self-worth, self-esteem, self-honesty, it requires self-honesty. It's all about ourself. So, yeah. So as I was saying about those candles, first is creativity through grace and the magic. Because sometimes it's not about knowing how it's going to turn about and how it's going to happen when we focus on what we want. But then there's the faith that's on the second candle. My bird's still back there. My bird has learned to take a break during these lives. The bird doesn't. Oh, here he comes. Here he comes. He heard you ask about him, the Grinch. The Grinch is here. So it's about having faith. After we start to create, is that it's practice and development through faith is how we create things. Greg and I were talking earlier, and sometimes things look worse before they look better when we're in the creative mode. Because that's dismantling process, right? It's dissecting, taking apart, and we have to have patience through faith, and so it's about learning these new words, where we want to navigate to. Where do we want to grow? Where do we want to grow? Instead of saying, where am I going? Say, where am I growing? Where am I growing? And then make a decision, because that's, part of our 12 steps too. When I'm in the 12-step program, it's about making a decision. And, making a decision with our source if we choose. Because for me alone, maybe I can't do it by myself. I need divine guidance. And that calls for our breath. That breath of life, that divine breath. And I'm not trying to get religious, because you believe how you believe. But if it's not serving you, because I know that I've believed in all kinds of ways. And when I first got to those 12-step programs, my belief wasn't what it is today, because it's about building a relationship with ourself and our source. But definitely building that relationship with ourselves, so we can have self-esteem, so we can have self-worth, so we can have, self-love, so we can have these things and give it to someone else, rather than manipulating and wanting them to give it to us so that we feel worthy. I had to learn that. So I'm about to tell you the story, okay? Tell you the story, and maybe you can relate to it. If nothing else I've said is relatable. So and the trust is the last candle. So I have 3 candles. So there's belief, and that's the first candle with the magic, believing in the magic through grace, because I don't know how it's going to happen, and forgiveness of myself to where I feel like I've messed up somewhere else, and to re-navigate through the mystery and have faith that what's meant for me is going to come to me, to just keep doing the next right thing, to just keep practicing, developing through this mystery, and that requires faith. And then we can trust. But then we can trust in the manifestation of the miracle, magic, mystery, and miracle. The miracle that's through the presence and the power of whoever our source is, our vital life force, if nothing else, and that we're still alive and you have a purpose, so just remembering that and to continue to navigate. My pain has, been able to create my purpose, and most people that inspired their pain has created their purpose. And if you've had pain, which if you're alive, you've probably had some pain, and it can create your purpose. So, of course you're alive or you wouldn't be watching this, right? So, having the faith, the patience, and the trust, or the belief, the faith, and the trust, and the magic, mystery, and miracles that are here every day for each and every one of us. Some days, we're just going to feel like we're just doing the next right thing, But faith is even in the unseen. And this is where a lot of times the faith gets lost, is when we can't see it, when it's not, just visible, tangible, where people see it. But realizing that it's, practice and development. This is why on Wednesday I get on here and remind you of your wins, because we're always in a process of creating, whether we acknowledge it or not, It's about being mindful about it. So sometimes when we pray for faith, life answers with patience. Sometimes when we pray for change, life answers with a growth experience. But eventually the mystery becomes history. Like, I wanted to be here near Cancun, Mexico. Yesterday I posted pictures on the beach on Facebook, and that was something that I loved to do 10 years ago. Now I want to be somewhere else. I want to put more clothes on because it gets hot down here. So I'm wanting to move to Europe. So I'm going to make that happen. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I have faith that if it's meant for me, it will happen. That by watching those shows and getting that feeling of excitement of knowing that it can, and just doing the next right thing in the practice and development, asking for source for my answers, doing my intentions are spread with my prayers, and my motivations are spread with my actions. So if I intend something and then I act on it, and it can be just little small actions like getting on here doing story time. Are y'all ready for this? Because it's story time now. Eventually, like I said, the mystery becomes history. And so what once felt impossible becomes something we have lived through, something we've done with, with our belief, faith, and trust. So sometimes our dreams manifest even better than we imagined because we stop trying to control every step. Sometimes I just need to chill out and go to the beach like yesterday. We can rest when our central nervous system isn't running the show, when our mind is, you sit still for story time. Excellent, because here we go. Here we grow. Thank you for those hearts. So the story example, first off, we're going to have the story of Bobby and John. So let's imagine two people in our story, okay? So take a deep breath in first, and then hold it a second, and release. We'll do breathing again at the end of this, but I just kind of like us to be able to regulate so we can listen, because I get excited when I'm on here, and I need to slow down too. So take a deep breath in. And release. We're only doing 3, then I'm going to read, and y'all just keep breathing. Stay with me now. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Here's our story for y'all who just come on. Here's story time. So let's imagine two people in our story. This is going to be Bobby and John. Bobby has always felt a little less than John. Is their friendship. John seems more confident and more successful, more comfortable in his life. Anybody have friends like that? And then women seem naturally attracted to John's confidence, right? Meanwhile, Bobby is constantly comparing himself. Bobby grew up in an insecure environment with a single mother who struggled. He learned early to take care of others, to rescue people, to fix things. So when Bobby chooses relationships, he often chooses women he can rescue or control. It feels familiar, but it doesn't bring him the connection he truly wants. John's life looks different. John grew up watching his father model honesty, stability, and respect in relationships. John learned to speak honestly about his feelings and expectations. One day, John's father notices Bobby's frustration and pulls him aside. He doesn't criticize him. Instead, he asks him a few questions. He says, "Bobby, what do you believe about yourself? What do you think makes someone valuable? And who told you that your truth wasn't enough?" Bobby pauses because no one had ever asked him those questions before. Because they just didn't ask him. And John's dad gently reminds him, "You have strengths you can't even see yet." When I'm talking to people about their chakras, which I'm doing in the Unbound Self, these thoughts, these ideas, everything drains down your neck, whether you like it or not. That's the truth, that you release chemicals from your thoughts and your ideas, and they drain down your neck. And then it expresses down into your body, whatever you believe about yourself, So you have strengths you can't even see yet. See, I didn't know 20 years ago that I would be here where I am now because I had these strengths that I didn't see yet. I didn't know 20 years ago that I was going to lose my son. So I had an expectation about how my life was going to be. I didn't know, that my daughter was going to suggest that we move to Mexico, and so, but we did, and now we're here. Who is Bobby again? I forgot. Bobby is insecure. John is secure because Bobby grew up in the environment with a single mom, and he didn't really see a father model to him what he wanted to be when he grew up, or what how he wanted to be, which was a clean slate, right? Because sometimes fathers model rigidity. Sometimes they are harder on their sons, I believe, than they are on, anyone else. So we don't have a beach or a river. Myself and sister used to swim in the big farm stock concrete water tank. Great memories, right? That's like on the Beverly Hillbillies, they used to say the cement pond. So yeah, it's good. The water is very healing. So John's dad gently reminds him, "You have strengths you can't even see yet." All of us need someone in our lives to remind us, and I hope that I remind somebody today, that you have strengths you don't even see yet. But you can't discover them while you're busy comparing yourself to somebody else. Those aren't your strengths. You're too busy looking at their strengths and diminishing your own. You have your own. So that moment plants the seed for Bobby. Then beginning of Bobby, seeing himself differently. Bobby got to, because he was asked those questions, because if someone's not interested enough in asking those questions, we keep performing. That's why if you have a coach or a therapist or somebody, they'll ask you these questions. That is good thinking. Greg is very creative. Now let's look at another story, because if there are women here, I want to relate to them too, and maybe the men can relate as well. So now let's look, and it will help Aussie Jace you to be able to understand your wife being insecure. So Carol and Bonnie. So here's Carol and Bonnie. Carol is beautiful, but she doesn't believe it. She constantly worries about what people think of her. She worries about how she looks. She worries about whether she is enough. Because of that worry, she holds herself back from exploring her life. Bonnie sees something different. Bonnie sees the way Carol lights up a room when she relaxes. One day, Bonnie tells her something important. She says, "Carol, people already see your beauty, but the beauty that changes lives is confidence." So she reminds Carol of something powerful. Care is not the same thing as worry. A lot of people confuse care and worry. They can be on the same scale. Worry is on the negative end, care is on the positive end. We don't obsess when we care. Worry can be obsessive because of that learned behavior, and that's an indication of trying to control. So care is not the same thing as worry. Worry tries to control what people think about us. But other people's opinions are their business. How we show up in the world is our business. So when Carol begins focusing on how she wants to show up instead of how she might be judged, something begins to change. Her energy shifts. Thank you. And the same beauty people always saw begins to shine through with confidence. So it radiates. Sometimes people can be beautiful, but have you ever noticed people that are beautiful and they're just beautiful? And then there's people who just radiate beauty. And the same with confidence and security. And I think a lot of us, I know that I used to be attracted to those people because I wanted to be like those people. But yet I felt insecure around those people because I didn't feel like that. So I would be too busy looking at the differences instead of the similarities. And I had to learn to look at the similarities so that I could feel unified and a part of things rather than the differences so I could be divided. Aussie Jace, I live in the Maui country. No surface water out here. We always swim in the concrete tanks. That is cool. That is cool. And y'all got creative with those concrete tanks. That's very cool. So I'm going to share 3 tips to move from insecurity to confidence if anybody is struggling with insecurity to confidence. Does anybody here acknowledge insecurity? You know? So 1, stop comparing and start discovering. You know, comparison keeps us trapped in someone else's story. Confidence grows when we start discovering our own strengths, values, and desires. Ask yourself, what makes me unique? And then ask, what experiences shaped me? And what strengths have I overlooked? And then 2, separate your value from other people's opinions. Other people's thoughts are about you are information, not truth. My neighbors have people coming over. That's what you hear if you hear that. Your value is not determined by someone else's approval. And confidence grows when you decide that your opinion of yourself matters too. So 3 is practice showing up authentically. Confidence doesn't appear overnight. It does not. It grows through practice. You do know your weaknesses? Has this helped you some today, Aussie Jace, to be able to maybe focus on your strengths? Because on the other side of your weaknesses is your strengths. Drinking is your weakness. That used to be mine. I have 28 years, sober and clean too. No weed, no drinking, nothing. And I'm still happy, but I had to learn how to be happy without that because that used to be my coping mechanism. Not everybody uses it for coping, and I'm not saying that you do, but I know I did, is I would drink, and I would drink into blackouts. So I had to quit that because I had 2 kids, and I didn't want to die. I wanted to raise my kids. I'm glad I was there. Thank you. Thank you. So confidence doesn't appear overnight. It grows through practice, speaking honestly, taking small risks, expressing your ideas. Because if we keep them trapped, they just stay trapped and then somebody else has it. And we're like, oh, I thought of that, right? Letting people see the real you because they'll love you. We fear that they won't, but they will. People love real people. Those are confident people, right? So every time you show up authentically, your nervous system learns that it's safe to be yourself. And I had to learn it's safe to be myself too. So I want you to think about this in closing of this story today. I want to thank you all first for being here. And if you have subscribed to this channel, thank you so much for building this algorithm. Because my intention is you're a happy drunk. Well, that's good. That's good. I was happy, but then it got to where I didn't know what was going to happen. When I drank, I would be happy sometimes, and sometimes I would go into a blackout. Most of the time, I didn't drink until I got unhappy, but I just didn't know what happened. I just didn't know. So, closing reflection is when we bring this all together, we see something important through story time today. When we move beyond worrying and wallowing, we begin working on ourselves and what we want. We don't want to worry and wallow. That's when we're accepting outside things inside. I have 11 slabs of homebrew beer in the man cave. No touching it till my hypertension and prediabetes is better. Yes. When I quit drinking, Greg, I didn't know how much sugar there was in alcohol, in drinking. And I quit drinking first time when I was pregnant with my son. And so when I quit drinking, I craved a lot of sugar, and I didn't know why, because I was drinking these orange juice glasses this big, and I had got gestational diabetes because I was craving the sugar. After dinner, I would walk to the TCBY, the yogurt place, and get that. And so people have to be really careful also who have food addiction, and because there's transference of addiction. So oftentimes the flour, and the sugar from food can also transfer into alcohol addiction. So that's how there's a transference of addiction. It can create the ethyl, alcohol or something like that. But yeah, I love this. I wish I could hear you guys talking. That would be cool. So here we grow. Back to the closing reflection. So we bring it all together. To bring this all together, we see something important. We see when we moved on worrying and wallowing, we begin working on ourselves. This is how we're going to gain our self-trust, our self-truth, our self-love, our self-honesty. First, it's that self-honesty bit. So we start stepping out of our old default settings. You may hear about these default settings, but not know what they are. And this is the imprint that was on us between the ages of 1 to 12. We can't just think this away. So we begin owning something extraordinary, our creative freedom, the freedom to grow, the freedom to choose, the freedom to create a life that reflects our value, because you already have inherent worth. You were born with that inherent worth. It's just that sometimes our central nervous systems, when we saw things growing up or we saw things in different periods of our life, we tended to constrict. And when we constrict, it causes limitation in our life. It causes limitation in our breathing, because then we're walking on eggshells, right? And so if we want to not walk on eggshells, we have to learn to breathe, darlings, because it's about noticing that you can't think your way out of this. You have to apply your body too, because it does affect your body. So the freedom to create a life that reflects our value, because you already have inherent worth. You were born worthy, darling. So the real journey is simply learning to recognize it and to nurture it, to nurture yourself. A lot of times we're putting that energy out to everyone else and not nurturing ourselves. We have to nurture ourselves. I took myself me and Soraya took ourselves to the beach yesterday, but having those friends that encourage you, that you're not afraid to be around of looking less than, that they encourage you. So, and when you do that, your life begins to change in ways you never imagined. Sometimes smoking affects my breathing. It sure will affect your breathing. Greg, how long has it been since you quit smoking? Greg quit smoking. And I quit smoking. I quit smoking 34 years ago. I actually quit smoking before I quit drinking. That's hard to believe, isn't it? But yeah, when I got pregnant with my son, I quit drinking and smoking. When I got pregnant, people would be like, I didn't think you were the type to get pregnant, because I was a party girl. I was married, but I was known from teenage years on up that I partied, and then that was my identity. 6 months, it's slowly killing me. I know it's like, again, right, Greg? It's worse before it gets better, because a lot of people who quit smoking tell me, I've coughed so much because it's that stuff coming out. And we will release those things and I just want you to imagine with each cough you're releasing, because I think that you're going to see what I saw when I quit smoking is I used to think that smoking would give me energy. I used to think that smoking would make me think better, because that was my rationalization and justification. So I would be like, oh, I'm going to do this after I have a cigarette. That was my reward system, but my reward system became pretty habitual, and so it's not a reward system anymore. Yes, he did good. He did good. You can too, Aussie Jace, if you want to, but you got to want to. I didn't want to until I got pregnant. I smoked a lot before I got pregnant, and cigarettes were going up. I can't imagine paying what it costs to smoke cigarettes today, because 34 years ago, it wasn't like it is today. And so, even when I smoked, I think they were like $2.84 a pack when I quit smoking, something like that. And it was something, close to $3 a pack when I quit smoking. When I started smoking, they were 55 cents a pack. So yeah, but when I quit, they were that much. But yeah, and then when I quit smoking, I started buying, because we transfer addiction. So then I started buying hand lotion, because I noticed that my hands smelled different when I quit smoking. and also bought candles so my house would smell better when I quit smoking. And that's because I was pregnant. I wouldn't have quit smoking had I not been pregnant. We smoke chop chop here. Well, is chop chop weed? I used to smoke that too. I quit smoking weed before I quit drinking though, because I wanted to not lose my kids. Because in Texas, weed's still not legal. So before I quit drinking, I quit smoking weed. But then I was like chasing this high when I would be drinking. And that's why I would start blacking out because I wouldn't get as high. But not to say that I stopped with the weed, because that's why I'm an addict, why I let myself be called an addict. It isn't that I put needles in my arm. I wasn't like what a lot of people perceive as addicts like that. You can be addicted to food. You can be addicted to alcohol. You can be addicted, of course, to drugs, and there's the same thing. Or you can be addicted to sex. We can be addicted to shopping. We can be addicted to all kinds of things. I'm not saying everybody is, but I just, we have to own it ourselves. I had to own my addiction, is that, because a lot of people made excuses for me because I didn't have any severe consequences. I just hated myself. I drove a minivan. I had 2 kids. They were like 2 and almost 5 when I got sober. But the thing was that I would like go to bed and my stomach would start doing things when I went to bed. It'd be like this weirdness going on in my stomach, and I'd wake up in the morning and look at myself in the mirror, and I hated myself when I looked in the mirror. I picked myself apart. Ah, yeah, boredom. Do you think you were bored, Greg? So anyway, for me though, it didn't work because what happens is if I smoke weed, then I get thirsty. And if I get thirsty, I start drinking alcohol. And then when I drink alcohol, I get sleepy. Then I start putting, cocaine in my nose or something in my nose and down my throat to stay awake. Hence, that's why I go into blackout, because I don't stop until I black out or I'm asleep. So that's recognized as an addict. Now, some people do that with food. They keep eating and then don't know how that they got there, just like in the blackout, And that can happen with also shopping, is that people think, oh, I've overdrawn my account again, and I didn't think it would do it, because even though we know that money's taken out of the account, sometimes it looks like it's not taken out of the account because it may come back. And then so our magical thinking is, oh, I have money in my account. At least that's what I used to do. I smoked a joint in 1998. I quit drinking in 1997, but I quit smoking weed before that because I didn't want my kids to get taken away from me. Because back in Texas, even still, if your kid passes positive, now they test your kids for drugs too. Back in those days, they didn't test but I quit drinking and smoking when I was pregnant. So, are y'all ready to breathe, darlings? I've had a wonderful Sunday sitting here with you, Greg and Aussie. Hard Rock food. Hard Rock, I didn't even know you come in. It's good to see you. You missed the story. What we were talking about is more about, how we can start working on it and our creative freedom. Do you feel like you have creative freedom with something, Hard Rock? Or is food an addiction? Because there is food addiction. I work with people. I get to see people next week. Is that, yeah, if y'all follow me on Facebook, and it's Stacey Renee, just say Stacey Renee on Facebook. But I get to meet with some people who I get to work with on Monday mornings that, I talk to them and encourage them about how to change their mindset around food. So they're called the Master of Badassery. They're on a Discord app, and the Master of Badassery. And I get to meet with probably about 5 of them next week or this week in Cozumel on Wednesday. So I'm super excited about getting to do that this week. So yeah. Where is your revolver? Are you talking a Hard Rock or who with the revolver? I don't have a revolver. I do have a sword, and I have the whatchamacallits, I forgot. Anyway, are y'all ready to breathe? Well, I thank y'all for being here today, and I hope you're going to have a super Sunday. Texas, that's right. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. Oh, my revolver. Yes, I see. I used to have I used to have a couple of guns. I've had guns before. I don't have any guns here because you can't come to Mexico with guns. The only people with guns here is the police and cartel. So as long as you don't bother either of those, you're fine. People always say, do you feel safe down there? Because sometimes in America, they say bad things about Mexico sometimes, or they have people afraid of Mexico or try to make them afraid. And if you're around border towns, there's fear. But like you said, in Texas, shoot, I'm more afraid when I go to Texas of getting shot than I am down here. so, but I'm not really afraid even in Texas of getting shot. I don't, yeah, cartel. The cartel doesn't bother me because I don't buy drugs and I don't borrow money. If you buy drugs and borrow money, you might get shot if you don't pay it back or what have you. But I don't know the cartel. The cartel doesn't know me, so we're good. We're good. I don't bother them. They don't bother me. All right. And that's the way that it is. They don't want people who aren't involved to get hurt. They really don't. So they're not just blindly trying to hurt people around here. Not even when they had that last little thing where they were upset. They weren't trying to hurt people. Yes. All right, let's breathe, darlings. Here we go. So I want you to think about what you want to create and owning your creative freedom. Sometimes having our creative freedom has us walking away from other things, so that we can have our creative freedom. Because not everybody does have your back. Not everybody does consider what you think and how you feel. But you need to consider what you think and how you feel. So maybe that creative freedom is just coming from inside you and how you can heal, of giving others your power. I know that I had to do that. So let's just breathe in that empowerment. It's not about blaming somebody else for where we're at in our life today. It's about creating from here, about how we can inspire somebody from our pain. Because most people that inspire me have inspired me from their pain. They've grown. They didn't let it define them. So how are you going to create and define yourself? So let's breathe in what it is we want. New words, divine. So breathe it in. Fill up your tummy. Aussie, come on now, you can do it. Hold it. And release. Gently and slowly, because what we don't want doesn't go away that fast. We released it with grace. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. We're going to do 5, so we have 3 more to go. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Breathe. Hold it. And release. Last one. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. All right. Are y'all still here? Did any of y'all relate with our story time today? Was there anything in there about Bobby and John or Bonnie and Carol that you related with? It doesn't seem to work for you? Well, keep practicing, Aussie. I always encourage my clients to practice this at least once a day for 5 minutes, but always start over with 5. Because what it does is it regulates you. Because I don't know if you grew up with childhood trauma or not, but what happens is that shallow breathing becomes a pattern. So when we're releasing patterns, when we release on the out breath, we can physically release some of those patterns. And then when we get to the other side of those, then we can release the goodness out into the world, because when I talk about these candle prayers, and I talk about just lighting one candle, and then lighting another and lighting another. So I'm hoping that this will help y'all, and it has helped y'all today. I want to thank you all for being here, those who have stayed through the whole thing, because I appreciate that, because that's the thing, is that YouTube has recognized that people were buying subscribers, so now we have to have so much watch time, and I don't get on here to get monetized, but would it hurt to get monetized? I'm not trying to repel monetization, but that isn't my sole purpose of getting on here. My sole purpose of getting on here is to help y'all regulate, and to help you regenerate, and to help you do what you want to do, and to help you create. With each topic that I create, I'm hoping to help you, because that's what helped me too. So it's about lighting your candle. That's what I'm trying to do. So that's my intention each and every day, whether it's one of you, Greg, or two of you, Aussie, or three of you, Hard Rock, however many's here, you're important. I didn't realize I had trauma when my son you did have trauma. That is very traumatic. And there's a lot of grief that went along with that, because we wish that we could have saved people, right? You wish that wouldn't have happened. And so we have a lot of regret, and regret causes grief. There's a lot of traumatic feelings that goes with that. You did have trauma, and I want to acknowledge that for you. That's very traumatic. Very traumatic. So to just, know that it doesn't define you, though. It was an incident that happened, and it affected you, and it affected you. It didn't just, and I don't know, your life has probably changed, because of it. And in ways, like, I wouldn't live in Mexico if my son were still alive. But we can't change some things. I can't change that. You can't change yours. So we learn to give ourselves grace. And I hope that you'll give yourself grace today and every day. Because that's where I really learned what grace was in my grief. And that's what I try to help people when I work with people through their grief. I try to help them to grow their grace, because grief and grace walk hand in hand. Do you think so? Did you experience that? That's what I experienced, because I blamed myself to a degree for these tragedies. All survivors do. I didn't even really know what a survivor was until that, and I'm sure you felt the same way. Why do I live in Mexico? I live in Mexico because my daughter presented to me after she lost her brother and I lost my son. It was hard to live in the same place and see the same things, and to see, it was a very tragic thing. So it was very well known, and so it was hard to live in the same place and to live that life and to be free. And so what we developed was seasonal depression also with our grief. And down here in Mexico, it's green all the time where I am right now. Where I want to move, it can be green, but I can also experience, it's been a healing process. Healing is a process. It's not just a one and done. I think, Greg, you probably experienced that too. It's not just a one and done. Is that we can grieve things. Grief doesn't make an appointment. Grief just shows up. And so how to do grieving with grace, because a lot of people have expectations of how grief is supposed to show up. That's where we learn grace, is we don't know how grief is going to show up till we grow through grace. And that grace is there's the unexpected that caused the grief, but then there's the unexpected that happens in grace. Greg, do you agree? That's a lot of G's, isn't it? So, hey, Bernard, that's why I live in Mexico. My daughter's like, Mom, because, also there's the political climate and things, and there's also a lot of anger and stuff in the world today. In Mexico down here, it's pretty tranquilo. That means calm. And so my daughter, when we were having these elections back in 2016, she's like, Mom, America is only 5% of the world. My daughter is brilliant, beautiful, and bold. She's like, do you know America is only 5% of the world? I said, yeah. And she goes, yeah, I want to move to a different country. And I'm like, really? Where do you want to move? And she's like, I don't know. I just want to move to a different country. So Texas, Mexico's just right across the border because I still have family in Texas and I still go back and forth to Texas. So, um, but I won't be just across the border when I go to Spain, because this is where growth comes in, is because I've learned to have that confidence through making one international move that I can make another international move. So that's where I learned that confidence, is that just doing these one little things. And that's the thing, is that I had to figure out how to ship stuff to Mexico. I had to figure out how to get visas for Mexico. I would party, drink beer, and smoke cigarettes. I know. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that when I'm glad that I was sober when I come down here, because they would send me back to America if I was drinking. That's what I tell people, because they say tequila is Mexico's water, right? And so I'm so grateful that I was sober a good long time before I come over here. I've been sober 28 years. 28 years. Do I know how to deal with media using people beliefs as a weapon by saying one belief is right and other? Yes, I've talked about that all this week, Binod. It's like the media can cause us to worry about it. They can cause us to wallow in it. And that's why I brought up that topic, because yes, I hope you'll catch my other videos and lives, but I've talked about that. So what that is that it's dysregulating people, and it's something we can't control. So it's about setting our own algorithm. So I hope that you have, subscribed to my channel, because this is what does it, is these algorithms, because that's what will pop up into your feed, is what you feed. So a lot of people tell me, sometimes because of this, they'll say, I'm getting off Facebook because all I see is stuff about the opposing thought, right? But it's like, are you looking for opposing thought? Are you looking for this? And so I have had to ask myself sometimes, because I get curious about what's going on, and people will present to me these things. And so I'm like, I want to know for a minute, but we can get stuck in it. So I have had to ask myself, Binod, I want you to ask yourself, when you get stuck in this, when it seems like it just keeps showing you the same thing, to say, what am I looking for? I have to ask my own self sometimes. Stacey, what are you looking for? Oh, thank you, Aussie Jace, for subscribing last week, because you are feeding an algorithm. And even by staying here, like I said, I was saying earlier that, my intention is to get on here and help people. So I did not buy subscribers. And my intention is to get on here hoping that something that I've learned and that I get to share with you will help you too, because that's what I do as a coach. A coach needs to have experience to be able to help others to navigate through things, right? And so that's what I do. But I also know that not everybody wants to get a coach. Sometimes we do just want to get on here and to just get uplifted for the day. And I do that too. Binod, I watch Neville Goddard videos and listen to Neville Goddard videos on here. I also listen to Dr. Joe Dispenza, because it talks about regulating our system and staying in our power and not giving the media our power, because the media wants your power. It's crazy. They do want your power. They want to divide people, it seems like sometimes. And, what happens is when people are divided, their central nervous system starts running on fear. And the media can feed you a lot of fear. And I'm not saying there's some not scary things out there, because there are some scary things going on in this world. I am not blind to that. What I'm saying is I can't control it by scrolling through it, is what I'm saying, is that I have to be mindful of what I'm putting in my mind. Do I respect all people's beliefs, whether they believe in Jesus, Hindu, Jews? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I do respect all those beliefs, because I'm not arrogant enough to think that God only speaks to one people's. You know what I mean? I think that's arrogant to think that God's only speaking to my religion or somebody else's, and I don't even claim a religion, because I like aspects of all those. But the one thing all of them do is divide sometimes, because we can all find things we don't like about those as much as we can find things that we do. So there's certain aspects to all faiths that I can respect, and there's certain aspects that maybe I don't care for. But the thing is with myself, I've looked at things that I respected and things that I don't care for. So when I can integrate what I'm feeding outside to my inside and my inside to my outside, what do I want to see? What do I want to see? I brought him an adult 3-wheeled disabled pushback to ride with me. A bit of father and son time. That is so cool, Greg. So cool. Yes, Binod. I have gone to kirtans with the Hindu belief system because just making that noise, sometimes I didn't know what I was saying, but that chanting and the music and that uplifting connects me with my source. So I do believe do more of that rather than the doomsday. Don't scroll and don't buy into what the religious faiths tell you about how the world is supposed to be, because your relationship with source, whoever it is, whether it's Hindu, whether it's Buddha, whether not, people don't really worship Buddha, by the way, y'all. Buddha was a teacher, just like Jesus is a teacher, and so it's about who do we want to teach us. And I'm not on here with religion because I don't promote any religion, and I don't demote any religion either, because I believe in having faith. And that your relationship with your source is your relationship with your source. It's not mine. So that's what makes us divine. Because to be accepted, we just have to accept ourselves, and we're going to accept everyone else. See, I'm not having to live up to somebody else's. And that's what I experienced with my own journey in religion is that everything's good until it's not, and it's bad until it's not. That some things I could do would be accepted, and some things I would not be accepted. And I'm just not going to try to be accepted by religion. I'm not going to try to be accepted by politics. And if you've subscribed to this channel, then that's probably you too, or at least to a degree, because I don't care as long as you don't put that here, because this is about unity. This is about love and how we can love ourselves and extend that to somebody else. So that was love, Greg, getting him that 3-wheel disabled bike so that y'all could do this together. And I know that you all are amazing people, and I so appreciate you for being here. And I wish you much love and peace this day, and I hope that you have a wonderful week. I'll be back here tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And yeah, I look forward to seeing y'all then. That'll be 8 Eastern Standard Time. So are y'all gonna come here tomorrow night so we can talk? What are we gonna talk about tomorrow night? Y'all got any ideas about topics? Binod, Greg, or you're about to go to bed? Yes. All right. If y'all have any ideas about topics, my email is in the description. And feel free to email me if you're struggling with anything or you want to share a victory. Or I knew what you were saying. I appreciate you so much, Greg. Thank you for staying here this whole time. I appreciate you all so much, whether you came in the beginning, I know Greg did, and or wherever you came in. Much love and appreciation to you. Y'all have a super Sunday. All right. Bye.